Hey everyone, Chris Carter here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. We got a lot going on. We got our first chance to talk to DK Metcalf and Darius Slay, and it's our chance to kind of learn what are they going to bring to the table. Also, Mason Rudolph is back. A lot to talk about here. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things on the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day because we're your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets back when you hit on your first bet of $5 or more. More on FanDuel later. All right, Steelers fans, we will get to Mason Rudolph's return in the next segment. I want to talk about that independently, but we got our first chance to talk to the Steelers' newest acquisitions, DK Metcalf, Darius Slay. At some point, we'll get down the road to Kenneth Gainwell and Malik Harris. But I think those are, of course, the two biggest additions to this team right now that you want to kind of learn about. And I thought it was interesting some of the things we got to talk with them about. One, for DK Metcalf, he's very excited, of course, to join the Steelers. If you're of the pop culture mind or variety where you're interested in like your love life, and you were really interested in Russell Wilson and Sierra being a couple. DK Metcalf dates Normani. She's an R&B pop singer. He told us, I think he kind of broke the news to the world through the Steelers press conference that he was now engaged to Normani. So that was pretty crazy. I put the clip of that up on the website. But for those who are here for football, I think there's something that we should talk about where it comes to DK Metcalf and what he brings to the table. That whereas it's like George Pickens in a different way. And I want to specialize that because I did a film study for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette on that. But I want you to listen to DK Metcalf and how he describes himself, what he brings to the table, how he sees the Steelers, and what his fit is. Here's DK Metcalf.
Okay, did you have a chance to watch the Steelers previously? What are your thoughts about how they play, and what have they told you about the style they want to play?
I played against them, so I see the type of style that they play. They're a tough team, a tough tackling team. And they're very disciplined from, being on the opposite side of them. But just to be in the same locker room with some of those guys, it feels good. But even with the free agency signings that we've had, with Darius Slay, just speaking on one of them, just going against him, the battles that we had, but just to battle with him in practice, Joey Porter, going against him his rookie year. So, Coach Tomlin has brought some great players into this league, has drafted some great players into this league. So, just looking to, add to, this historic organization.
Arthur Smith had A.J. Brown in Tennessee. Can you envision yourself maybe like in A.J.'s role when he was with the Titans?
Yes, sir. I'm my own player, so just looking for my own lane in his offense. He's a great coach, had some great, exceptional players, in Tennessee and last year here. So, just looking to put my own mark on his offense.
So DK Metcalf, just saying like, hey, like, he respects the Steelers. He knows who they are. He knows what they've been about. But one thing I think that DK Metcalf can bring, as he says, he's going to be his own man. He's not just going to be A.J. Brown and Arthur Smith's offense, but he's going to fill that role, right? Like he's the big, fast, tall wide receiver that can be a wide receiver one and make plays down the field for you. But something I noticed when I was going over his film, a lot of his deep ball receptions when he's going up against a cornerback, he catches it differently than George Pickens, or at least he attacks it differently. George Pickens, he's the kind of guy where he'll go up with his wiry arms and he'll snatch down the ball in the most insane situation, and to the point where DK Metcalf even says like his nickname is Freak Show because he's too talented, and he's just a freak the way he does things. But with DK Metcalf, when he goes up to win his deep balls, and they actually have very similar deep ball contested catch rates, I believe, actually looking at it here. George Pickens' deep ball contested catch rate, which is if there's a defender contending for a ball that's been thrown 20 yards or more down the field, Pickens comes down with those passes 41.7% of the time, compared to DK Metcalf's, who's 42.9% of the time. So very similar numbers there, almost very close to identical. Now, I think what kind of works against both of them is that they have a lot more of those. When you look at deep balls in general, DK Metcalf gets 32 of those. George Pickens got 31 of those over the past season. And when it comes to contested opportunities, DK Metcalf had 14. George Pickens had 12. Those are among the most in the NFL. So more opportunities, but also, a higher rate of, there's some people that have a higher percentage rate of success on contested catches on deep balls because they just only had a few of them. They were able to win there. But the way they go about it is different. When George Pickens, like I said, when he uses his wiry arms, he often is just great at tracking the ball, locating it, snagging it with his strong hands, and pulling it down regardless of who's around him. DK Metcalf is more, he leans more into his frame. Because remember, DK Metcalf is like, 6'4", 235 pounds, while also running a 4.35. He uses his speed to back off defenders because they can't allow him to get behind him, because if he does, it's game over. It's a touchdown. But then what he'll do is that he will use that big frame in his body to just box defenders out and make it so that it's not truly a contested catch a lot of times. And that's when I think that he's at his best, when he's getting those chances there. And he still does have his contested catches. There's plenty of those sideline grabs that he has. There's ones he catches over the middle. And he's tough. He's physical. I think he's shown why he deserves wide receiver one money. But I think it's going to be interesting to see how he fits in with the Steelers as far as being that physical number one presence, because it's not just enough for DK Metcalf to be a talented playmaker who makes plays deep down the field. He also has to be a leader, and a leader by example as well. He doesn't have to be the loudest guy in the room. And in fact, I asked him about leadership, and he was like, it wasn't necessarily a conversation. He said it was just assumed that he's going to be a leader for the team. That's something I think this team needs desperately. They need offensive leadership, guys that can kind of tote the flag and say, hey, everyone get behind me. I think back to when I was a kid, the Steelers wide receivers after the mid 90s, when not like Yancey Thigpen and Ernie Mills, when those guys left, I remember thinking with like Charles Johnson and Troy Edwards, like there wasn't any good receivers, but then Hines Ward like emerged as a really good playmaker. And then he became the tone setter for the receiver for like the next decade. And that set the stage for the Steelers to have great receivers for so many years. And like when that Young Money crew came in with Antonio Brown, Emmanuel Sanders, and Mike Wallace, they got to learn from Hines Ward. He set a tone for them. And when Santonio Holmes got to the Steelers, Hines Ward set a tone for him. And so I think that's what DK Metcalf has a chance to be, is not just a talented playmaker, but a leader for this offense and for this receiver room. They need it desperately because, George Pickens, we've seen some of the things about him. And look, George Pickens could end up growing up. He could end up getting sharper, be more responsible about things, more accountable. And that'd be great. But I think that it would help to have someone who could challenge George Pickens in the room, as something we talked about last season when George Pickens got hurt late last season. He missed the Eagles game, the second Ravens game, and everyone saw how rough it was for the Steelers when he wasn't in the lineup. There was that sense of see, they need him no matter what. They can't afford to bench him. Now there's a guy where if George Pickens isn't living up to expectations, if he's not doing everything that he's supposed to do, DK Metcalf will just take every single target, every single rep, and be a guy that's the Steelers don't have to worry about he's our only real weapon right now. And I think that's something that DK Metcalf's role could be really important to what the Steelers are trying to do, especially this year, as far as setting that tone. The Steelers need him to be part of that mission there, because the offensive leadership, there's been so much turnover. It's been very difficult to have leaders at all. But now you're going to have Metcalf coming in, being paid a lot of money. You have Pat Fryermuth on a good contract. Isaac Seumalo is more of a quiet guy, but who emerges as leaders in the offensive line and who ends up being the quarterback? All of those things play a big role in it. But DK Metcalf, as the number one wide receiver, who's been paid to be a number one wide receiver, he has to not just play like a number one wide receiver, but he also has to lead like a number one wide receiver. And that's going to be a bigger narrative in this year than many people realize. But we do know the Steelers added a quarterback, and it's one we're all familiar with. It's Mason Rudolph. I want to talk about Mason Rudolph and what his impact could be on the team, because we just talked about that on yesterday's episode. So keep it here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'll break down what we know about Mason Rudolph coming back and how I think it's going to fit with this team moving forward. That's next here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. But first, I remind you, this show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the #1 sportsbook in America. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first bet of $5 or more wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. With tournament games happening almost every day, there's always something exciting to bet on. The FanDuel app is simple to use, and when I win, I get paid instantly. No waiting around. And remember, new customers get $200 in bonus bets when you hit on your first bet of $5 or more. That's $200 in bonus bets if you're a new customer who hits on their first bet of $5 or more. So to do that, visit FanDuel.com and get in on all the college hoops action all tournament long. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. We're back here in the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. We'll get back to the things we learned from the players who spoke at the podium on Thursday in a bit here, because we do have some clips from Darius Slay that I think are pretty cool to talk about. But let's talk about Mason Rudolph and his return, because that was, I think that was some very good quarterback news. That was like one of the few things that helped make Steelers fans feel a little bit of relief. Now, according to the details we've seen reported, it's a 2-year, $8 million deal. With $4.5 million to return to the Steelers. I'm not sure how that's written, Mike Garofalo, but anyways, 2 years, not more than not much more than $4 million a year for the Steelers. That's a great rate. For the Steelers to get Mason Rudolph back. He's a veteran backup quarterback that you've had. And look, if push comes to shove, we've seen what he can do as a starter for the Steelers. As long as you have an offense and a team that's not dependent on the quarterback to have to throw way too much, I think that he could fit in that role there, because we're still waiting to see what happens with Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson or whoever else they try to make a decision on at quarterback moving forward. I look at Mason Rudolph, and I still think that there's that chance. I think it's interesting how there are some people out there that were saying, "Oh, Mason Rudolph, he'll never come back to the Steelers. He hates Mike Tomlin. Mike Tomlin did him so wrong," and then he's coming back to the Steelers. And it's kind of like the guy who gave him chances. And yeah, sure, he drafted Kenny Pickett behind him, and then Kenny Pickett, was given the chance to play. But then when Mason Rudolph made plays at the end of last year, he was given every chance to start. I mean, Mason Rudolph, after that first Bengals game, said that he was preparing for the real estate exam because he thought that's what he was going to have to do, is get into commercial real estate, because he thought his NFL career was over. And there they go. The Steelers give him a chance. He shines and he does well. So the question will be, can the Steelers get Mason Rudolph to be more like the Mason Rudolph that was at the tail end of last season, 2023, where he helped the Steelers win 3 straight games at the end of the season to fight their way and get back in the playoff picture, which he did do. Now, I think it's important to note that in doing that, Mason Rudolph, I think, did a lot. He kind of had a lot of things rolling his way. For example, the Steelers' run game really worked in those games. They were able to get things going. The offensive line played at a better clip. There were more readily open wide receivers. And when you look at what he was able to do in general, like, last year, 2 years ago, when he played for the Steelers, he had 5 touchdowns, combined between the regular season and the postseason. He had 5 touchdowns to 1 interception, and he was, he was kind of keeping it, bottled up. And I think that's where, that's what the Steelers told him to do, because, hey, like, you're not bringing in Mason Rudolph to try to win you the game by being aggressive. You're trying to bring him in to manage the game by being aggressive in select spots. But this past year, there were quite a few more interceptions with the Titans because they don't have the same strengths as the Steelers do, and so they had to put more on Mason Rudolph to have to deliver in certain spots. And I think it took him out of his comfort level, and that's why he was 1-4 as a starter for the Titans. In his 5 starts, he threw 9 touchdowns and 9 interceptions. Last year, 3 touchdowns to 0 interceptions in the regular season. So I look at Mason Rudolph, and I still think this is a guy who can play the system that's in front of him. And like in this way also, like if you're still chasing after one of these bigger name veteran quarterbacks that are still floating out there, like if you really believe that Aaron Rodgers is still the best option, or if you really believe that that Russell Wilson should come back. Mason Rudolph is kind of a comparable backup to either style of play because they're both very similar. They're both kind of over the hill, and Mason Rudolph I think can play that for you. But I think there's also the chance, and there's some Steelers fans out there that feel this way, where they feel like if Mason Rudolph is able to to come back and play very well, should he just be QB1 and should he be the quarterback that's the bridge quarterback until the Steelers draft one next season? And I hadn't considered that part of the equation before, yesterday. I was kind of thinking like, oh, they should sign Mason Rudolph, bring him back as a backup, and that'd be a fun little project. But when I was looking at it, I was like, you know what? There's some things that add up about this because when I look at how the Steelers have managed situations, Mason Rudolph has been a guy who has stepped in at different spots. He's been asked to do different things. He's been very conservative in his pass selection, but he's also when it's time to get aggressive, he's gotten aggressive and he's delivered some impressive strikes. I still think the Steelers should be going for a veteran like a Russell Wilson of some sort. I'm still out on Aaron Rodgers. I'm sorry, just all the other crazy things that go on around him, just his time with the Jets and him not showing up to mandatory minicamp, and now you're seeing him like supposedly it's not even about money. He's deciding and he's taking forever to decide. Just instead of going through all that, just go and get the guys that if you get Russell Wilson, I think Mason Rudolph gives you at least the option where like if Russell Wilson is going rogue and you can't control him and he keeps making mistakes, there's an option ready for you right there. And I think that's something that Mason Rudolph can provide, is that he gives you a sense of security. I also think it's a good thing that they signed him to a 2-year deal, because this way, if push does end up coming to shove and the Steelers don't get either Rodgers or Wilson, well, then maybe you can just say, hey, Mason, you're the guy this year. You're going to be the guy next year, but we're probably going to draft a guy. I could see that happening there. But bottom line is, I think Mason Rudolph will take a job, and he'll take a job with a team that he's very familiar with, and the team that gave him the shot in the NFL in the first place. So I think that this is a good move. I think it's a smart move, and I also think it was timely because we just did a segment on this yesterday, for the Thursday episode, where we answered a question as far as Mason Rudolph's return. And I said, I'm all for it. Get him back around the organization. There's no more quarterback that doesn't like him and Ben Roethlisberger. There's a lot of things that they'd have more time to be able to help with. And I think that this is a good thing that Mason Rudolph could really come in for the Steelers and be a solid option. And the question is, will he be a solid QB2 or will he end up having to be QB1? Because let's face it, there's been a lot of things in this quarterback hunt in free agency that have just gone awry, and it's led to some issues. So I think being prepared for the worst situation, it's something you need to do. But it's also about seeing, is Mason Rudolph, should he get that starting job? Should the Steelers be satisfied with that? I don't think so. I think that they should still be pushing to figure out other options, or give them another option that could start above Mason Rudolph. But if he's if he holds a spot on the depth chart at number 2, I think that's more than fine. I think that when you look at Mason Rudolph and what he's going to be able to do, you're going to see him when he gets those shot plays, he's going to launch it, and he can also see over the middle better than Russell Wilson did. Granted, they're probably going to be limited with how risky they want him to be there, because they don't want him to turn the ball over. Because again, Mason Rudolph, game manager, not playmaker, and that's where I think that the Steelers can see more return on how on having Mason Rudolph at quarterback while fixing other things and working on things moving forward. So at this point, if the Steelers are to get Mason Rudolph, I could see him being QB2 if they do go and keep a bigger name there, or get a bigger name there at quarterback. But don't be shocked if that bigger name doesn't happen for whatever reason, and all of a sudden the Steelers have to make tough and tight decisions rather quickly in a vacuum. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, with this quarterback room, and who's going to be favored in this situation. But I think there's a lot of fans who really liked Mason Rudolph, or at least appreciated his run at the end of the season in 2023. And there's people excited to see him get a chance. And so I do wonder if that's going to be what happens, in this free agency period, where, if the Steelers, are to get Mason Rudolph at quarterback, while, fixing other things and working on things moving forward. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, if the Steelers are to get Mason Rudolph at quarterback while, fixing other things and working on things moving forward. So in this free agency period, where Mason Rudolph turns into a guy who can bring answers for the Steelers in a way that he really hasn't had the chance to over the past few years because of who was in front of him or who was behind him or all those types of things. So plenty to discuss there. We will keep revisiting the Mason Rudolph situation, but I want to talk to you guys about Darius Slay because I thought he said some really interesting things about his connection to the Steelers through history and through the current team. I want to talk about that next year. We'll do that here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, I remind you this show is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place so you stop just managing your money and start actually building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first order. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year when you sign up from Monarch Money. We're back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. We continue our show here talking about things. Now, I want to shift to Darius Slay because he's the other big free agent acquisition. And listen, I'm a person who, when it comes to Darius Slay, I wasn't sure he was the right option because of his age. But something interesting popped up in these conversations this media session where he talked about mentoring and how he loves to do it. And he really likes Joey Porter Jr., and it makes me wonder, are they getting Darius Slay to help try to cultivate Joey Porter Jr. into being the cornerback of the future? I thought it was cool the way he answered this question or talked about being a mentor. So here's Darius Slay when being asked about what he can do in that department.
Slay, knowing how important it sounds like mentors have been to you, how much do you like mentoring some of the younger corners and working with someone like Joey Porter Jr.?
It's gonna be great, man. I love that. That's the best part of my job. I love meeting new people. Some people don't like meeting folks. I love meeting folks. I love having an extended family because I like just to meet people, and I'm very outgoing. And that's one of the biggest roles I like to take. Just helping mentoring younger guys because God did that for me. And, so I always got to return a favor in my way, and that's how I do it. And I do it with genuine love, not by force. It's because I want them to be great. I want them to always be better than me. Any guy I ever had under me, my job is try to make sure they be better than me as a player, person, and everything.
Now, last year we got to see Darius Slay's mentorship or guidance play out in real time because the Eagles drafted two cornerbacks in their first two picks of the draft last year. Quinyon Mitchell goes first, and then you get Cooper DeJean, and both of them played vital roles for the Eagles. But both of them also had a close relationship with Darius Slay. And I think that's where Darius Slay is going to try to help the most, is try to get through to Joey Porter Jr. about what he needs to improve upon, how he needs to be better. And I think that's a good thing for the Steelers, is that Darius Slay is not just coming to just be a playmaker and because you think he still got it. You're getting him also to help you develop Joey Porter Jr. with another guy that can set a tone, who's had plenty of experience. I think that's an interesting way for the Steelers to try to go about this situation. But again, looking at how things have played out so far, I think that Darius Slay can expect to be the starting cornerback. But I do think it's going to be interesting to see how did he work with it. But that's not the only thing that they feel a connection with, because Darius Slay also has a connection with Teryl Austin. Teryl Austin was his defensive coordinator way back in the day, and when Teryl Austin was his defensive coordinator, there were certain processes, and Teryl Austin was challenging him. And I write about this in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. But here's Darius Slay when he was talking about Teryl Austin and how he challenged him as a coach when he arrived. Because remember, Darius Slay, he was drafted, I believe, in 2017, I believe, and then in 2018. So he played his 2017 season. He only starts like 4 games, doesn't accumulate a lot of stats. But then 2018, Teryl Austin comes to town. They build a bond, and I'll let Darius Slay explain how that's worked out.
Slay, what do you remember about TA for the 4 years that he was your DC, and how excited are you to play under him again?
It's gonna be great, man. Like I got him at a young age, second year in the league, and that's the first person that I had met when I got to when I came back into Detroit. And the first thing he said is like, I love you as a corner. I watched you when you came out, and I'm gonna make sure you one of the best. And he pushed me every day. He made me do scout team reps with Calvin Johnson when I was on first team D. So he made sure I got to where I needed to be. We watched film together every morning. He helped me become who I am today, and I always looked at him as a father figure. Because we stayed in contact even after he left Detroit. He went to Saints. He was talking, and then he come here. His nickname for me since he's been here has been top 5. Every time you see me, top 5, top 5. So we got a great relationship, man. So he gave me help to get my first All-Pro. So I'm always looking forward to working with him.
What has helped you at this stage of your career continue to be so productive?
Honestly, man, I gotta give another good shout out to TA. He taught me early at a young age, don't use your talent as much. So, only use your God-given when you need to. And what he mean by that is that basically, become a film room rat. So I kind of learned the game real quick, real early. And, people think I'm moving fast as I possibly can. I'm not, just because I just know where they're going probably before they're going. And that comes from watching film with TA and just trying to make sure I use my ability as long as I possibly can.
Now, that's something that I think is really interesting when Darius Slay says he studies so he doesn't have to use all of his physical abilities all the time, and he can use it for as long as he can, lengthening his career. When you watch his tape, and I go back through a lot of his breakups, and by the way, he has a lot of breakups on the season. He had 16 official breakups according to Pro Football Focus. It's a lot of times he got his hands on the football to break things up. Now, he only got 1 interception, but again, 16 breakups, that's a lot of passes that he's ruined. But when you look at how he does it, it's because he does such a good job at reading the hips of opponents, reacting in real time, breaking things up, playing the trail correctly. He does a lot of those little things right. And hear me out. I think it's good that he does a lot of those little things right. And a lot of you are saying, but Chris, he's 34. I'm not so certain that him doing that is the biggest thing the Steelers are trying to get out of his $10 million a year deal. Yes, that is, they want him to play well, and he needs to play well for this team to be a better team than it was last year. But at the same time, I fully believe that a big part of the reason here is because they are trying to make sure that Joey Porter Jr. is not a bust. They're putting a vet with leadership capabilities around Joey Porter Jr. They're going to let them grow together. He's going to be able to push him. He's going to be able to challenge him. And I think that's something that could be good for Joey Porter Jr. is to have have a Darius Slay in the room who can help figure things out. Because then again, Darius Slay's connection to Teryl Austin. And if you don't know about Darius Slay's career in his first year, he started in 4 games. Once Darius Slay got into once Teryl Austin came to the Lions, where Darius Slay was with his first team, Darius Slay worked his way up, was getting interceptions, and eventually became a first team All-Pro cornerback in 2017. So I think that when you look at what the Steelers are getting here in Darius Slay, he was able to grow under Teryl Austin before Teryl Austin was the Steelers' Teryl Austin, and I think that this could be a concerted effort to try to get a leader like Darius Slay who comes in, who can mentor, who can help Joey Porter Jr. You get a new secondary coach in Gerald Alexander, and Teryl Austin oversees. And I know a lot of people don't like Teryl Austin, but here's an all-pro Super Bowl champion cornerback telling you that Teryl Austin is a valuable asset and help to build him up. And maybe it just takes more of a concerted effort to get through on certain things, as far as how the Steelers, want to play, how the Steelers want to be, and then how they want Joey Porter Jr. to continue to develop. So I think that's an underrated part of what Darius Slay could do for the Steelers. Because again, Darius Slay, he's only been around for a year, but if he can help Joey Porter Jr. be not just around, but extremely effective for the next 6 or 7 years, that was worth the contract. So I think that's part of what's happening here. But we will see as things move along here as Darius Slay gets more acquainted with his surroundings. We'll start to get a look on other things here as well. I just want to say thank you to everyone for tuning into the Locked On Steelers podcast all week long. A reminder, I will try to put up my Mock Draft Monday post on Friday so that more of you have time to kind of do things. We'll explain the rules when we do. But Mock Draft Monday, as always, just give us your screenshot and be sure to show your name and under the post that I do either on my Twitter account, my Blue Sky account, or the Locked On Steelers Facebook group. Basically post your mock, your full 7-round mock. We'll discuss what the rules are as far as what your parameters are, and then you can move forward there. So anyways, thanks again for everyone who tunes in. Thanks for everyone who's excited about Mock Draft Monday. We'll have that back next Monday. But this has been the Friday episode of the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, all the social medias at Carter Critiques every single time. You can read my work in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, post-gazette.com for that. And you can also find me here on the Locked On Steelers podcast every day, Monday through Friday, breaking down your Pittsburgh Steelers. Have a happy weekend, y'all. We're back Monday with more on the Steelers.